Hello and welcome to FOV Ventures Viewpoints, podcast series upon a variety of topics. And today's topic is education. This is the last of the viewpoints presented by me, but by all means, it's going to be probably the best one because we have an amazing cast of speakers in today's podcast, which I'm going to bring onto the stage right now. So we have Reedah from Brainspar Games. We have Etienne from EDAILABS and Märt from Futulabs. Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing?
Hi.
Hey.
Hello. Welcome and thank you for being here in the podcast. So I want to, before we get into what your respective companies do, I want to go a quick round and ask to briefly just say an introduction to yourself and share what was your most loved and most hated subject at school. So let's start with Reedah and then go to Märt and Etienne.
Hi, Tiago. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm Reedah El-Sai, founder of Brainspar Games. My most loved subjects were English and probably physics, mainly because of the kind of creative nature of those subjects. And I think with physics, it just gave me a better understanding of the world. I haven't really thought about the subjects that I hated, and I have to say I loved school. So I don't really have a subject that I hated. So I'm afraid I can't help there.
Fair enough. Märt?
Hello, this is Märt from Futulabs. It's a good question. I think most loved probably back. It depends what era of school you also think, like which phase. I think if I'm thinking like earlier school years, then whatever I was good at was really great. So math, English, literature at times. What I wasn't so good at was actually, I think it was had a lot to do with teachers. And actually, I think physics and chemistry are quite up there because they just wasn't taught in a very exciting way, even though they could be fascinating subjects. And probably like crafts, whatever you call it, we had to do stuff with your hands. Also, it's really all because of teachers. They could all be really great otherwise. So hopefully we can change that with our companies.
Interesting that you start already broaching some of the topics here, which are how the educators have a very important role to play on whether the learners do love their subjects or not. And finally, Etienne.
Well, it's a really good answer he gave, Märt. I agree with that. I hated German at some point because I had a terrible teacher, and now I'm doing things with language learning, but I hated that. I love mathematics, even though sometimes teachers were not good at it. But I loved it so much. But yeah, I hated German because of a teacher, and I hated geography also because of a teacher. So I love the way Märt responded to this question.
I gotta say, I hated geography at school personally, but I love geography now. I mean, I'm capable of spending hours in front of Google Maps just searching stuff. It is very much also dependent on the context and ultimately the educator that has an impact. We will definitely approach this topic in more detail later on, I think. So before we do, I think it's important for the viewers at home to also know a little bit more about what your respective companies do. We don't need to spend too much time, but just a quick overview of what everyone does. So, Reedah, why don't you start?
Well, so Brainspar Games is building an eduverse of free, culturally inclusive, AI-powered augmented reality educational mobile games aligned with UK national curriculum. But we do intend to kind of grow the platform so that we can integrate and bolt on curricula from different parts of the world as well. But our focus is very much on immersive educational mobile games.
Got it. Super interesting. Märt?
So Futulabs is building STEM learning games in VR and maybe also hopefully MR in near future. There's a curriculum aligned as well for secondary schools, and currently it's mainly chemistry and some physics in our offering. And our other product, we have software, and then we also have basically an all-inclusive VR for schools, which includes a lot of partner apps, basically everything a school might need to adopt VR and use it in basically all the subjects it has. That includes partner apps, headsets, case for the headsets, accessories, service support, and so the headset management solution. So, yeah, 2 products.
Awesome. Feels like a lot to dive into. And finally, Etienne.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do at EDAILABS, which stands for laboratories, AI laboratories in education, is we're trying to scale one-to-one tutoring. Because there's what 1.5 billion students, and there's only probably a limited amount of tutors, probably 10 million or something like this. So we need to scale that. And to scale the tutor, we need to digitalize, to virtualize it. So that's what we do. We virtualize a private tutor, and we make it available on an app through 3D avatars that are linked to AI, so you can interact with them. And then we add a layer of teaching with AI, and it works really well.
Interesting. I think the bigger conversation now, and personally a question that I have for everyone, is what drove you, what led you to try and crack education, or at least the particular part of education that you're each trying to solve? Was it personal insight or some particular problem that you set out to solve? I want to hear a little bit more. Maybe Etienne, since you've spoken the last, why don't we start with you and where it came from?
I would have a lot to say about this, but if I want to keep it short, I would say the first question you had was, which subject did you hate? And I hated German because my German teacher told me at some point that I was so bad at German that I should pick Italian instead of German. I took it really personally, and then 15 years after, here I am. It's really that frustration I got with bad teachers, or teachers that were not really good at giving, like empathy and pushing you to do better, but just trying to make you feel like you're stupid. That also links to the ways that I think education could go faster in their methodologies. So I became obsessed really early on, um, with building methodologies that were designed better. So I wrote 2 mathematical books. I wrote one book about how to teach languages faster. And so it became kind of an obsession to say, hey, where I failed, a lot of people fail too. But I got through that, and now I'm good at what I was really bad at. And I want everybody to understand that they can be good at something that they think they're bad at, if they have the right methodology. So it's always been like this, like literally for the last 15 years. Now it's my 4th company, and my first company was already an ed tech company. So it's been an obsession of mine.
So you're a serial educational entrepreneur, if you will.
Definitely, yeah.
Just out of curiosity, were the math books that you wrote also to prove your math teacher that you could learn math, or were you actually good at math and that's what led you to write
Well,
those
I
books?
was good at math, but my little brother was okay-ish, and so I was like, I want to teach you my way of seeing mathematics, and I think that's a better way. So let me write that down for you. And the write that down note became a 200-page book, and became 2 200-page books, and that was just made for him.
That is a lot of dedication to your brother. I very much admire that. There's also something that I resonate with, which is the ability to make people believe that they can be good at something that they are not currently good at. I think,
Yeah.
particularly in the world of corporate just work, there tends to be the tendency of saying double down on your strengths. But this is a good story that you can just say, hey, actually, I want to be improving my weaknesses in this case. And maybe there's a reason as to why I'm weak, and it's not just me. All right. Thank you, Etienne. It's a very interesting and inspiring story. So let's go to Märt. What drove you to do a company in education and to try and give it a crack in the space?
Yeah, actually, I come from the game design background. So long ago, I lived in Canada for 10 years, Vancouver. Ended up actually working with the guys who made Slack. Before that, it was a game, so I was the first employee there. And yeah, so over time, I kind of wanted to build something useful. That games are obviously the most exciting thing in the world, but they also kind of can be very just time passy and not really, in the end, giving you much. But if you could teach using games, now that'd be amazing. And once... So I already had these ideas brewing in 2017 when I really tried VR properly for the first time. It was very obvious that the way to build, you can build anything, and you can really transform a person by building these very specific experiences to teach anything. And yeah, from there on, it kind of became about finding the team and kind of figuring out what exactly to build. And I would say it's more like we approach it from the point of view that this thing has to exist. You have to be able to learn the stuff you learn in schools normally in the 7th, 8th, 9th grade, where you maybe that are most crucial for getting this excitement for STEM. We want to have that these apps and these virtual reality experiences to exist. So it wasn't necessarily that where can we make the most money, or what is the biggest pain point that schools have. So yeah, so we kind of believe in that, and we think we have some proof that it's legit. Let's see how long it actually takes for the kind of education system to adopt these immersive technologies in a wider scale.
Do you think that that's going to be a slow process? Do you think that education adopting new technologies is always going to be a slow process?
Yeah, there's so many. Yeah, there's many issues. A lot of learners are all different. There's a lot of technology. Teachers all need to be retrained. Not all, and not so dramatically, but obviously, I think this is a whole 1,000-page book on what all could be done. Yeah, I think it's slow, but I think it's also inevitable and gradual. So,
well, hopefully, we're not going to write a 1,000-page book now, but I would like to go into those issues later on because I definitely am interested. But before, I definitely want to hear the story of Reedah. So, perfect segue, because Märt was talking about games, and just by the name, of course, Brainspar Games seems to be involved. I've done a little bit of research about Brainspar, but I'd love to hear how you came about to your idea.
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple of very personal pain points for me. So I'm a mother of 3 children. I wouldn't consider myself a proficient gamer. I played a few casual games. And so there were 2 main pain points. One was the frustration that I felt with having to oversee and manage homework, revision, and the stress caused about exams, caused as a result of exams. And it became a real battleground. I mean, when I was growing up, no one was particularly hovering over my head. And I think as a result, I loved learning because I was kind of left to my own devices. And there's a lot to be said for that sort of system. But I think then the combination of Fortnite, which became the bane of my life a few years ago. So I have 2 older sons and my daughter, but my sons, we literally used to hide the controllers in the safe. And there would be battles to come and have dinner. And it was just so stressful. And then the very first time that I was homeschooling my son for his 11 plus exams over the summer, we agreed that he would revise 45 minutes, take a break, and he could do anything he wanted in that 15-minute break. So he was super motivated, super focused. And I couldn't understand what was motivating him because he'd keep disappearing. So he was playing Fortnite at every break time. And so when I saw Fortnite and how creative and immersive and engaging it was just literally that magical moment where I just said to him, my God, this is incredible. Why are we fighting games? We need to embrace this as a medium that 91 to 93% of kids under 16 are using. And, why is educational content not being disseminated through games? So for me, it was like a no-brainer. If this is what the next generation are growing up on, we have to embrace it and kind of harness the power of games. And if that's what they were addicted to, wouldn't it be something if we got kids addicted to education through games? So that's how it started. And I did research for about 5 months because I had no intention of starting a game studio or an edtech studio or anything like that. But as I researched more and more, I found that there were a couple of platforms that were either edtech or games, but nothing that had deep kind of pedagogy in the substance of the educational games, and vice versa. So pre-COVID, these two kind of industries were considered very separate. And then with kind of post-COVID, there was a real convergence of these industries. And I think that's what's really heightened the interest in what we're doing in the games that we're building.
At least you were hiding just the controller and not your credit card, as some other parents have had to.
We did hide the credit cards too.
Sorry for making you relive such a
the virtual
world. But I really find it compelling that you mentioned how incentivized they were to be able to play games, and how the realization that you had was, why are we fighting games as opposed to finding a way to work within games or work with games and develop games? And certainly, how can we, and this is me obviously making a leap from your argument, but how can we make education as engaging, as addictive as games have become and can be? I've looked a little bit at the game and education mixed space, and you're right. Previous to COVID, it's always been very, I'd say, bland experiences that were half-hearted at what they were trying to achieve. But this brings the question. I mentioned before in the article that accompanies this podcast that education by default is gamified. It is meant to have leaderboards. It is meant to have competition within its natural mechanics. It even has achievements and other types of very classic features that games have and demonstrated for quite a long time. So why isn't it as engaging and as fun and as addictive as gaming? What has been missing? And maybe Reedah, because we were just speaking about this, I'd like to bring this question to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question, and kind of building on what Etienne was saying earlier, that if you happen to have a bad experience with a teacher, there are a number of challenges with the traditional education system. First, it was designed to produce children to prepare them for factory work. It's antiquated. It's not keeping up with the latest innovations and technologies. Teachers are not getting the training on what those innovations and technologies are. But actually, although it's always been gamified, there's a reward. High achievers are celebrated. They're the kind of the level that you aspire to. But if you have a teacher that you just don't connect with, it can completely destroy that learning journey. And I think the benefit of an educational game system, or a good one, is that it doesn't rely on the personality of an individual. It's a completely democratic process. And using AI the way we do, it allows for that user personalization, so that as you're doing well, you can do more of that. But as you mentioned, Tiago, if you're not doing particularly well, or if there are areas that you're weak in, it helps you to build those strengths. So the games can take you back to the areas where if you played a game, you didn't revise the topic in a particular way, you can go back and play a different game, but have the same learning outcome. So I think the benefits of AI and user personalization and technologies are that it provides a democratic kind of access to people in every corner of the world. So for us, we've kept our games free to make sure there's no barrier to learning. And we chose mobile games because we felt that even in the poorest, most deprived areas and regions, most people still have access to a phone. We've started building the browser-based version as well. But that was the most democratic way to access as diverse a population as possible.
I like how you mentioned the ability to go back and relearn the same subject but with a different experience, because of course if you go back to relearn something in the traditional educational experience, that typically means that you have perhaps flunked a year and are going back to somewhat a similar experience, and there is a lot of negative charge associated to it for the learner. So I like how it relieves the learner of that negative experience and can just make them
and also the learner's not
happy.
even aware that they're going through this. So it's not like your
Right.
teacher's saying you failed, and there isn't anything wrong with failure. Like, we celebrate what we call failures or getting something wrong, but actually just going back and thinking, okay, I didn't understand it this way, but maybe I'll understand it a different way. So we've designed our games for visual, audio, reading, writing, kinesthetic learners to make sure every type of learner is fully engaged. And we've also been developing neurogames technology so that if the learner is on the neurodiverse spectrum, we are designing for every type of learner. And also one of our core USPs is that we've got a culturally inclusive curriculum. So it's really important to see diverse characters that the learner can identify with and aspire to. So if you see a mathematician or a philosopher or an artist or a writer from your part of the world, it just kind of enhances that sense of self-esteem and gives you something that to aspire to and relate to as well.
I think that's a very interesting and important topic. One that I'm going to just temporarily put a quick pin on, but because I definitely want to hear Etienne's and Märt's thoughts on the gamification of education and how we can make it more addictive and engaging. But I do want to go back to how to build products for a very diverse range of users, which are learners, right? So Etienne, Märt, what are your thoughts on how we can make education more engaging, more fun, as gaming has been able to achieve so far?
Who do we want to talk to? Märt?
Feel free to go, Märt.
Sure. So our focus is more like, I would say, like doing science is a little more universal, perhaps mechanical. So we're not like physics is physics, it doesn't really care who you are that much. But yeah, I think you must really this is getting a bit bigger topic now, but up
we
to
love
now,
bigger topics.
Let's assume AI will be the one doing personalization by knowing something about each user. And you could say that until now, it didn't really know too much about you. Like, it kind of knows how you move the mouse and keyboard, but unless you fill out like a profile, it doesn't know who you are really. So I think some of the future is definitely trying to feed it more information, whether that's, if you're talking immersive technologies, by cameras that are kind of tracking you and understanding a little bit what kind of mood you are in, or that's going pretty advanced now. But in a simpler ways, knowing what country you're in, what languages you're learning in, what's all your history of learning. So maybe connecting to, all the different kind of learning activities into a bigger system. So those are my kind of thoughts where to go.
Great. And Etienne?
Well, first I like to talk about what Reedah said. There's two things that I noted. The mobile for diversity, I think she's totally right on this, and that's the route we're going down also. I think for now in 2024, mobile is the only platform that can reach billions of users, and probably VR will be at some point. I'm sure about that. But that's the first thing. That's why we're building in mobile. We thought a lot about building a web application. Second, Reedah said something really interesting. She said we're building diverse characters, so users can relate to different characters, because users are different. We're all different, and we like different people. And we talked. The first question you asked, Tiago, was about the teachers and the subjects, and we all said, yeah, we hated that subject because we hated that professor. So what we're building at EDAILABS is that if character.ai, right? They're building thousands of characters, of AI agents characters with a real depth and stories. Well, that's what we do in a way. We do characterize AI, but with a 3D layer. So we give consistent, like physical consistent to those characters. And then we add a layer of education. So, and this is what Reedah said in a way. She said, like, you choose the character you want to interact with. And with what we're building, our first product is a scalable tutor. So you choose the tutor first. So we need to build a diverse array of characters. Then then Märt said, and I want to talk about that because and Märt and Reedah, you said AI will do personalization. This is a really broad thing to say, which is partially true. But what kind of personalization? Because we're talking about personalization for the past 10 years. And you could argue that Duolingo is personalized, although it's not really. What I think is really interesting with AI is that it brings personalization on the fly. That's, for me, what my view of what personalization with AI means. I'm going to give you an example. If you're Duolingo, you build content in-house and you distribute them horizontally to all your users, and you say they're personalized because one user is starting at level 24 and the other one is starting at level 12 and the other one is starting at level 36. But it's not really personalization. It's just everybody has a different starting point. Now, AI can build the exercises on the fly just for you when you interact with it. And that's what we're building. And I think Reedah and Märt also are doing this. It's like the more you're talking to the virtual tutor, and I'm talking about our product, but same thing, the more it understands which exercise it needs to create for you to make less mistakes and to understand more things. And that's where we couldn't do that before the LLMs. I couldn't create an exercises just like that. I could create a bank of exercise, a library of 30,000 exercises and say, oh, if the user said this and this, then choose this exercise that I've already created. What I can do now with AI is that I haven't created anything yet. Talk to your virtual tutor and he would create on the fly an exercise just for you. And that's where it gets really, really interesting. I mean, that's my opinion.
I think that's very interesting to pick on because it's a good segue for the topic that Reedah was already approaching and the one that I want to approach first. But before, I want to say we're very proud that it took 26 minutes for us to mention Duolingo in this podcast. I'm actually very proud of that. And although they are not yet very personalized, I think the news just came out that they are introducing more personalization via the introduction of AI. But Etienne, to go into the point around how to make, now that AI allows us to be hyper-personalized, this perhaps subject of we're building for a very large and not homogeneous user base, which are learners. How do we build for such a scale, for such a diversity of a user base? Now, perhaps is being addressed from, let's call it the exercise layer or the topics layer and the content layer by AI. But what about other areas? I think Reedah was beginning to answer that with the different types of learnings, like kinesthetic learnings. How can one build an education product that caters for these differences and preferences in the learners, not just on the content, because that can just be, as you said, Etienne, on where they are on the scale of learning of the subject, but rather interfaces, features, and so many other parts of the product. Let's start with Reedah, because I think that she had some very good thoughts previously to that. You're muted, Reedah.
Sorry about that.
Go ahead.
I think there's just, in the age that we're living in and the onset of AI, there's scope to just add on so many different features. And I know Etienne mentioned, user personalization has been around for 10 years, but I think it's important to understand the context of what you mean by that. So do we mean a deeply personalized experience where that individual learner is absorbing information, responding, their moods, their sort of eye tracking movement. So a lot of those things can be built into those systems. As I mentioned, we're also developing this, we're doing some R&D that's been funded by Innovate UK around neuro games and neuro wellbeing. So we're also trying to support the wider learner's journey as well. And I think all of that can be integrated into what is traditionally perceived as a gamification process. I mean, parenting is gamification. I certainly had reward charts with my children. They do something well, you get extra points, and it's amazing what kids will do for stickers and things like that. So I think it's just a case of understanding what motivates the learner. Everything we do is very kind of human-centered design. So we co-design all our products with our end user, who are the children, the parents, and the teachers. So where as a team we may have made assumptions around what user personalization and why AI is being used, we always take it back to the end users for them to tell us, well, actually, this is a good idea, but my personal experience is X, and I'd love a feature that allows, A, B, and C, or whatever. So I think we're just in a very different age where we can add so much more value to that learning experience. And I don't think we have to be rooted in a knowledge-based curriculum either. So there's a huge kind of drive towards skills-based curriculum, 21st century skills, inquiry-based learning. And I don't think we have to lose that knowledge-based curriculum, but I do think we need to integrate all those elements to really optimize that learning experience for those skills of the future that you also reference in your article. So I think it's just a really exciting time. There's potential to collaborate, to innovate, to build on what's been done before. I don't think any of us is kind of doing anything so revolutionary or so different. We're building on lots of traditions from before as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I probably will get back to what is the revolutionary piece at the end of the subject of the podcast. But Märt, I know that we were talking a little bit more about the taking into account the different preferences of learners and the habits, etc., into building your product. Any thoughts on that? How have you made sure to integrate those in the products that you're building?
Yeah, we have for the medium of immersive tech, there is a big advantage that it really supports people who are kind of who are on the spectrum of having different let's put it, attention deficits, or I don't know how to put it. Yeah, there's there are people who really, and we actually just got a study back today from Italy where they did 100 students questionnaire, and they really found that everybody was really focused, had a much better, like after playing Futulabs modules, had a much better kind of feeling towards the STEM subjects they were like learning. Yeah, they had like distraction-free environment. So I think a lot of the just by the nature of the medium and the kind of our module design kind of standards that's now been worked out, it is helping us a lot with that. Yeah, I don't actually know if there are like there's definitely like there are all kinds of how do you put it, like neurodiversity is a wide spectrum, right? Like there is kind of the autism spectrum, but I guess you can also take into account all kinds of other, if people have issues with hearing or seeing or physical mobility, or then yeah, I don't think we are quite covering that spectrum yet, but I think that is coming later as well, because you can do a lot with kind of virtual reality.
Yeah, but as you said, I think just by the medium in
but yeah.
No, but I think what you mentioned is that by the medium that you're operating in, you're certainly catering for a different class of students, more perhaps kinesthetic learners, because they are around experimenting in the field of view, which is 360 potentially, as opposed to just a traditional knowledge-based curriculum that Reedah was talking about.
Yeah, you definitely don't, when you're in VR, you definitely don't want to hear somebody just talking at you, or, you know, kind of reading a book or something. You rather want to do something, and then you want to have that information kind of presented to you visually, or somehow kinesthetic.
I'm sure we've all had experiences in VR which were exactly just like that. But
Yeah, it's
sorry, I
pretty
cut you
natural,
off.
I think, that way. So, but yeah, again, it's due to the medium. I don't. I think we just happily kind of cruising and following that the strengths of the medium there.
Mm-hmm. Etienne, I know that you already contributed a significant amount to this subject, but just in case you wanted to add anything else before we move on to the next few topics.
Well, not so much to add. I think we talked a lot about the teachers. What I'm trying to build here at EDAILABS with our team is uh, not just or not particularly a new methodology, but just saying what would be the ideal teacher and how to scale it. Because if we agree that having a private teacher is the way to go, and it's probably not the best way to go, but is the way to go for at least go one step further in education excellence for everybody, then how can you scale that human? That's what we're trying to do. So we're not really thinking too much at that stage for us about the methodology. We're more focused on, we agree that having a one-to-one tutor is the way to go. Let's scale that tutor and then think about, oh, now that everyone has a tutor, what's the best methodology that he can use? So, for us, it's a two-step process. So first scaling the human and then scaling the methodology.
Well,
That's how I see that.
well, let me pick a little bit on this and perhaps maybe push back a little bit. So, of course, the way that you're describing it is great, and ideally, everyone has that extra complement to their traditional methods of education. But the way that you are describing it, it is a, let's call it, supplement on top of the traditional curriculum, or whatever version of the official formalized curriculum is. And this is, I think, also a very important piece to see how it can evolve, how it can improve, how it can be made better. And maybe, Etienne, this is where you are also trying to do it. But the way that I've understood it is you're wanting to give that scalability as a complement, as a supplement, not necessarily trying to implement that in the core of the curriculum. And so this is where perhaps Märt's mentions of some of the issues might come in, because you're going to have to then deal with educators, as we've already mentioned, that they might not be all perfect, but also schools, governments, even parents, right? The stakeholders.
I have a very decisive say in this. Is
Go
that
ahead.
You scale the education product. I mean, the easiest way to scale it is through the user and not through through the learner and not through the teacher. I did that with my first company, and what I did was, oh, you want that app for free? Then talk to your teacher and say, we need that app for free. And then teachers would reach out to me and say, hey, I got like 10 students talking to me about your app. Can we have a free access? So I do think, but maybe I'm wrong. I'm wrong on a lot of things, but is if you want to scale an education product, you need to go get your users first, and the teachers then will say, okay, every one of my students is using your solution. What is that? I think it's just easier and more scalable. But
I think that's a very worthwhile growth strategy. Absolutely. And I'm wondering, would that lead to a situation where the educators are using it in their classroom, or are just simply saying, yeah, that's great, we have now provided you with that supplement, that complement for your traditional education? Because I think that this is also where I want to get at the heart at, right? How does the experience in the classroom change, and what is the management of stakeholders in the education space needs to be like for that to change? And so, open question to anyone if anyone wants to take this one, because I think this is the hardest one.
I think from our perspective, so we've play tested with over 1,800 children, parents, and teachers to tackle exactly that challenge, like who is really our customer, who is really the beneficiary. So the beneficiary is the child; they're not really the customer, because the client will be the parent or the educator. And we've realized that actually it has to be a multi-pronged approach, because sometimes it will be the child recommending it to parents and teachers, and they'll chat about it in the classroom, and that will make it kind of go viral. But also there will be a teacher who just really loves and wants to embrace innovation and the latest technologies, or is a hardcore gamer. And so they'll be the first to kind of play test. The only time we've had a teacher, this was a school in Wales, and I won't say which one it was. This teacher was like literally banging on her iPad saying, "What do you want me to do? I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this." And what was really interesting was the children then taught her how to play the game. And it was a really beautiful thing to watch, because suddenly the children felt really confident and really empowered. And also last year we play tested with 5 cent schools in East London. And typically these they're all boys, they're all very disruptive. Many will not pass GCSEs. But when we said to them, this is not a lesson, we just need gamers to tell us what they think, they all sat down, they all fully engaged in, and they were learning about the Tudors. I mean, you can't get drier than that. And it was the teacher that came back to us and said, if you could develop these games as GCSEs, this would be really transformative for these boys. And so I think being really open to what the user wants, what they need, and then letting them tell you what the pricing ought to be, like what the licensing, how it ought to work, but also not, I mean, we've not had a very strong sales approach, mainly because we've been in a period of R&D, but we've definitely found that sometimes going to local government has really helped. They've introduced us to all the schools in the borough. Sometimes going to the schools or school chains has really helped, but also then going to parent WhatsApp groups, and then going to the kids. So we've kind of been keeping a really open mind to testing with everyone.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. We're definitely going to pick up the question of government, but Märt, how have you been engaging with all of these different stakeholders for your project, and what's the experience been like?
I definitely want to piggyback on that using kids in schools as kind of the first level of tech support works really well, also in our experience. So we've had different approaches. In Estonia, our native market, we're in 12% or something of schools. Here the grants work really well. So it's kind of you have to kind of know the people. Well, you just have to know what grants are around and kind of set up so it's easy for schools to write them to get the headsets and the solutions. Internationally, we're working with several resellers, definitely having like kind of getting the word out there, SEO, some trade shows. So I can't say that we have like one super like clear go-to market that we just kind of hammering. I think we have a success in different ways. So maybe we're still figuring that out. I think also with one, like every year, it's getting so much better to do VR deployments as the different parts of the ecosystem come online, because you have the big tech isn't like education is not the top of mind. It's basically business and consumer markets. So solutions for deployment and in general, like headset solutions and so on have really improved a lot in the last few years. So in some sense, also the time is kind of playing for us. Also, I want to say that in Europe, localization is a really big key. Even though everything is in English, like you go to Germany, Holland, we actually just won a big deal in Belgium. So and we also need to localize everything for that. And that makes a lot of sense. And we built a product accordingly.
Of course, a big issue here in a fragmented continent as Europe. But I think that I like how we're all agreeing in that Etienne's initial prospect of using the users as a first port of call, whether that's for growth, whether that's for testing, whether that's for learning and research and development, is the best way to go for it. But Märt, 12% of schools is a very, very good percentage to be in.
Estonia is also
strategy
like,
is working.
Thank you. Estonia is also not that big, so but yeah. it's
doesn't
a good
matter.
start.
It's a big percentage none at all. Okay, as we are going through the last few minutes of the podcast, I want to maybe talk about some of the biggest issues, biggest challenges that you folks have encountered. Whether that's conservative incumbents, legal frameworks. You've mentioned localization is obviously a barrier. What are some of the quick challenges that you've had? Märt, maybe start with you because you've clearly gotten 12%. So.
So I think in general, these are the issues of adopting new technology. So we have to kind of educate the market at the same time, and not everybody. There's many cases where people put on the glasses and they go like, "Wow, this is amazing." On the other end, you have somebody who is like kind of maybe close to retirement, which is a lot of teachers in Estonia. Estonia is like super high on the PISA scores. I think we're like #1 in the world or something, or like so. There is a good reason to say that we're doing everything correctly, but on the other hand, like you want to look at the future, then you need to look kind of past those. So yeah, getting people to kind of understand new technology is a big one, also internationally. Then I think for building the product in general, the correct pedagogy is also a good question, because like there is many how would I put it, people who are kind of ahead of the pack in Estonia as well, kind of who are up with the latest science and are really like thinking how the future education should work like. And there's many questions like what should we be teaching at all? If you can ask everything from AI, like what skills should we really be teaching? That assessment doesn't happen like in the process of in the end of what you're doing, but it would happen in the process. That in general, like with our immersive tech, you want to learn by doing. So you want the thing to be actually fun, not like doing it for some kind of carrot in the end.
Yeah.
And how you tie it all back to real life problems. I know Prism's VR in US is doing that really well. So yeah, there is a lot of aspects of that as well that we're kind of figuring out as we're going, and some things we have figured out. So
great. Reedah?
Yeah, I guess for us, the challenge is that we can't move quickly enough. And that kind of depends on having a workforce with the right skills, because what we're developing is quite new and quite innovative. And by definition, we, even when we were interviewing for curriculum specialists, they were saying how they were talking about those future jobs that they don't know exist yet. And, what we were requiring didn't really exist. It hadn't been done before. So I think for us, kind of having a skilled and talented creative workforce that has the tools to do the jobs that we need. And I think certainly the production cycle, like I just feel we're not moving quickly enough. And that's why we're building this AI engine to kind of enhance the production of our games, to really speed that process up. So for us,
games are hard. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And take
they
forever.
are
underappreciated.
Yeah.
Okay, and finally, Etienne, what are your challenges?
Well, for me, it would be hardware and connectivity, because we're using 3D on a mobile phone. So if you want to scale a human and it should look like a human, it has to be quite detailed and it has to move like really fluidly. And it's really hard to do on lower phones. It's quite easy to do on the latest iPhone, but then not everyone has the latest iPhone, so that's the first problem, which is going to get better with time, but we're not there yet. And the second thing is connectivity, using all the large language models that are not yet embarked on your phone. At some point, they will be directly locally available on your phone, so it's going to be way easier to use them. But for now, we need to use APIs, and so APIs rely on connectivity. So if you don't have the right connectivity, then your discussion with the LLM is cut, and boom, it doesn't feel natural anymore. And so hardware and connectivity are by far for me the two hardest thing to overcome. But it will get better with time. So, you just need to be patient at some point.
Well, I have to say that I had perhaps preformed conclusions about what would have been the biggest challenges that you've mentioned, such as conservative government officials or conservative educators. But I'm very glad that none of you have mentioned, at least deeply, about that. So you've basically mentioned particularly entrepreneurial problems, such as recruiting and hardware and tech stack. So you've already changed my understanding and my opinion about this subject.
I think it's
Hopefully,
a given that government and education takes a while to kind of change.
It is. It is. It is. Well, hopefully, this was equally informative to the viewers at home. So, I want to say a big thank you to all of you for participating in this podcast. Thank you. And to everyone at home, thank you for listening. And we will see you next time.
Thank you,
Bye.
Tiago.
Thank you,
Thank
Tiago.
you.